A lot of people, thank you. I know a lot of people have said that they were going to be here, but I think the snow has, the snow day has affected everybody. And so, but we're going to proceed on. We are recording it, so we can share it with others who could not attend today. As a bit of housekeeping, my internet, this is Jerry, my internet is hanging on by a thread, and so if I disappear, I'm going to try my best to come back. If for some reason I cannot, then we will reschedule this for next week, and we'll send out notifications for that. So, and I apologize in advance if that happens. My name is Jerry Wolf, and I am the liaison at the Regents Center for Learning Disorders at the University of Georgia. And I'm also a program coordinator for the BreakThru project, which, as you guys know, is a joint collaborative grant between the University of Georgia and Georgia Tech. So I am on the UGA side. With me in the room today as moderators is Summer, and most in USO. That's really not her last name. She's recently gotten married. Congratulations, Summer.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I guess I just want to say thanks for being here, even though I know that the weather is going to be crazy soon and things are kind of hectic around Atlanta. So we just appreciate everybody being here, and I guess that's it. Just thanks for joining us.
Yeah, and Summer is, she works predominantly with our post-secondary students and the post-secondary mentors. She also does a lot of our graphics and our advertisements. So anytime you see a really fun email, Summer is normally the one who creates that for us. And also here is Lisa Destish, and most of you should be very familiar with Lisa. She works with the high school students and high school mentors. And Lisa, do you want to say a few words?
Oh, well, I just want to welcome everybody. Michelle and Sherry, thank you so much for coming. I think you're going to really, really learn a lot. Jerry is just wonderful. She knows all of the stuff that people need to know when you're graduating from high school and going to college. So I'm just really glad that you're here. Thanks for coming.
Yay. And as people come in to the session, I'll ask the moderators just to greet them in the chat. Please keep your mics or the talk button off during the presentation, but feel free to ask questions throughout the session, and I'll be happy to try to answer them as we go along. To ask a question, just type it in the chat box, and you know, I will hopefully see it, and if not, I'm sure I'll get a tap from either Summer or Lisa about the question. So with that said, I did want to make a big announcement about the BreakThru project. We are doing our open enrollment push. We want to enroll as many students as possible during the last part of this year, which will carry us on into the beginning of next academic year. So please get out there and beat the bushes for us. We want to work with your students, and we think that the BreakThru project is such a wonderful, wonderful endeavor and is very, very beneficial. So please get out there and help us recruit. Now, without further ado, I'm going to keep going. For those of you who just joined, my name is Jerry Wolf. I work for the Regents Center for Learning Disorders and for the BreakThru project. And today we're really going to talk about how students with disabilities can prepare for that transition from high school to college. And in doing so, we're going to talk about the Regents Center for Learning Disorders. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that office is, the differences between high school and college. And you may think that that's intuitive, and you may know that, but I think you might be surprised at some of the information and how it can trip students up. We're going to talk about the actual transition to college and focus on the documentation that a student needs to bring with them to college. And then once they get into college, how do they stay there? What kinds of skills should they be working on now to help them be successful in college? I'm working on turning up my volume. Am I too soft for everybody? How about this? Can people hear me better? Good for you. Lovely. All right. Let's go on. The Region Center for Learning Disorders. There are 3 of these centers across the state of Georgia, and the Region Centers are funded and an initiative from the University System of Georgia. And those are, the university system coordinates all of the state-funded colleges and universities. So what we're mandated to do at the Regent Center is to provide specialized assessments for students who suspect that they have some kind of learning disorder. And what encompasses a learning disorder can be learning disabilities, attention deficit disorder, psychological disorders, autism spectrum disorders, and traumatic brain injuries. So we really focus on the disorders or those disabilities that are more invisible and are cognitive based. So our assessments are very much a psychoeducational type of battery. Because we focus on the academic environment, our evaluations actually inform what types of accommodations a student can receive in an academic setting. So while a student is in high school, they are, there's a team approach where teachers and evaluators and parents and the student themselves work together to find the best educational fit and educational services for that student. In college, it's all about the documentation, and accommodations are matched to what's in that documentation. And so the evaluations at the Regent Center really highlight the appropriate accommodations to help the student be the most successful. We also conduct training and research activities, and there is, as I said, a Regent Center here at UGA, and I'm located in Athens. There is one at Georgia State and one at Georgia Southern. Okay, differences between high school and college, and I'm going to go through these really quickly. Basically, the differences between the two systems are based upon the laws that govern each system. So in high school you have the IDEA, in college you have 504 and ADA, and so the different laws help determine what kinds of services and how those services are delivered. Specifically in high school, because you have this mandate to provide a free and appropriate education, and you educate the students in the least restrictive environment, there is a wonderful team approach, and it's about even about intervention. You're looking for ways to provide interventions to help the students learn and find the best ways for them to learn. So it's the responsibility of the school to identify the student who may be struggling, identify their learning needs, to evaluate that student, to provide accommodations, to include the parents. They're a big part. Obviously, these students are minors, so certainly the parents are involved. And then the parents and the students and everybody, you get used to this. I mean, gosh, you've been going through this K-12 system for a number of years, and now you're graduating and you're getting ready to go to college, and suddenly the whole system is different. And it's not just a transition for the student, it's also a transition for the parents, a big transition for the parents. So in college, the student has to self-identify. The student has to go to the disability office at that college or university that they want to attend and say, I have a disability. They have to provide their own documentation to the college. They have to make requests for accommodations each semester. The accommodations, as I said, are determined by the evaluation data. So what happens is that evaluation, that documentation provided to the disability office becomes extremely important. And so the more comprehensive it is and the more current it is, the better it is for the student. Big piece of what students have to do in college is to be a self-advocate. And I know we've all heard that term before, but it is so true. The college is not going to seek the student out, and the college is not going to know if a student is struggling. The student has to be able to communicate their needs, if they're struggling, if they're doing well, whatever it is, the student has to be able to talk about their disability and what they need. Because the students are not educated in a separate environment. They are in the regular classroom. They have to fulfill the same requirements as all the other students in the college classroom, and so they may do that with accommodations, but it's a bit different. And since I pointed out some of these differences, you can see that there's this shift. In college, it requires this individual knowledge. You have to understand yourself. You have to be mature, and you have to be able to advocate. So the responsibility shifts from the institution to the student. And so, and in addition, and this is very important, because a lot of students, when they leave high school and enter college, they may not want to be identified as a student with a disability. And it happens very frequently. They want to do it on their own. They want to be like everybody else. And this is their opportunity, because they're in a new environment and nobody knows them, and they can blend in. But if they go and they start going to classes and taking tests, and let's say they start doing poorly, and then they go to the disability office and say, hey, I have a disability, I need to retake some of these tests, you can't do that. Disability accommodations are not retroactive. It starts from the point that things are set up for that student. So if they wait a semester and then identify the disability services, everything that they did the previous semester, it stands. Even if you take one test and you do badly and then you go and get accommodations, you cannot go back and redo that test. So it's very important for students to really understand that it's in their best interest to utilize the services that are available to them in college. Okay, how are we doing? Any questions so far? Okay, the documentation. It's so important. For colleges, a student has to be determined eligible to receive accommodations, and eligibility is determined or it's set out for colleges by the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. It says that a student must have a condition, and it's not enough just to have this diagnosis. This condition has to impact and have a substantial impact on a major life activity. So it's not enough just to say, okay, I have diabetes. If the diabetes is not substantially limiting you in this academic setting, then there are no accommodations for you. You're doing fine. Why do you need accommodations? So you're not disabled under the law. You do have diabetes, that doesn't change, but it's not something that needs to be accommodated at that point things change, I know that, but just to get that point across, it's not enough just to have a diagnosis. There has to be some impact in that academic setting. Documentation in secondary schools is used for eligibility, but it's really used for instruction and intervention. In colleges, it's used for eligibility, but for access and accommodation. So in college, what we're trying to do is to provide the student access to the classroom, access to a building, let's say, access to the information. It still means that a student can use all their accommodations and they still may do poorly. They still have a right to fail. So it doesn't guarantee success. You're not going to change instruction, and we're not going to develop intervention strategies. It's really about just access to information. Oops, let's see. It's also really interesting. A lot of the students and a lot of our colleges are using a test called the Compass. And sometimes it's the ISAT, the ISAT. And they're using this not just for college placement, but they're also using it for admissions into the college. This is, you think, wow, this is great. It's important to realize, though, that you're not yet admitted to this college, yet you're going to be required to maybe take this entrance exam. And to do that, you may need special accommodations. So it's important to really direct the student to go to that disability office, even if they're not yet admitted, and talk to them about what kinds of accommodations can they receive on these high-stakes tests. Because, it truly is. If this is a test that's going to determine if you're admitted to college, that's pretty high stakes. And you need to be able, or a student needs to be able to use their accommodations on that test so they can show their best. So what I would say, it's very, very important to gather your documentation now. If you're a senior, start gathering your documentation, and then also research the different schools that you might want to attend and find out what that disability office is. Go there for a visit, talk to them, call them on the phone, give them your information even, your documentation, let them review it. The disability office can provide you with provisional services, provisional accommodations to take some of these tests before you're admitted. So it's real important to use them as a point of contact for that institution. I really already mentioned this, the definition of a disability. You have to have a substantial limitation to one or more major life activities. And you can see here some of the major life activities that are actually mentioned in the law. Walking, breathing, pretty good ones. Seeing, hearing, learning, that would affect us. Other things are interesting. Reading, concentrating, thinking, communicating, and major bodily functions. So there's a lot of different types of major life activities that could be impacted by a disability. And that's where that documentation really needs to show how your condition is impacting you in an academic setting. And here's some of the typical disabilities that you will see on a college campus, probably very similar to what you see on your high school campus. Things that people don't ordinarily think of as disabilities, like I mentioned earlier, diabetes or heart conditions or depression, epilepsy. Some of those are a little bit more unusual. More common things that you see are more the attention deficit, the learning disability. In fact, I would say in Georgia, the most common disabilities on a college campus are number one, attention deficit disorder, followed closely by learning disorders, learning disabilities, and then psychiatric disabilities as the third. And then after that, other disabilities are less prevalent. They're still there, but we're going to see the majority of the schools are working with and serving students with learning disabilities and attention deficit and psychiatric disorders. And in talking about these psychiatric disorders, we used to see things that were relatively mild psychiatric conditions, but now we are seeing more and more students come in with what I would think of as more severe types of psychological disorders like bipolar, like schizophrenia. So we are seeing that these students are coming to campus, and campuses are now trying to figure out how's the best way to serve the students. We are also seeing an increase in the number of students on the spectrum coming to college. And a lot of the ASD students, they don't typically have a lot of academic issues. A lot of times their issues are more in the interpersonal and social arena. And so oftentimes that's a challenge on a college campus where it is a community living and community learning environment. So a lot of times it's very, very, very important for the student who is on the spectrum to work closely with the disability office. Documentation. Most, and I would say in the state of Georgia, let me qualify this. The state of Georgia does have documentation standards that a student must meet in order for them to be eligible to receive disability services. And these standards are developed by the university system, and the Regent Centers are ones that actually review documentation for the purposes of meeting those standards. So a little bit about these standards. The documentation needs to be current, and we like it within 3 years of the time the student applies to college. So, and the reason for this is the most current information about the student, the better it is for us to identify the most appropriate accommodations to better serve that student. Oftentimes we'll get documentation about a student and they were diagnosed with ADHD, and I have their report from when they were in the 4th grade. And you know, I don't doubt that that person has attention deficit, but how attention deficit affects that person has changed, dramatically changed from the time that they were in 4th grade to the time that they were in 12th grade. Learning disorders or learning disabilities, attention deficit, these are classified as developmental disorders. So we expect them to change as the child develops and grows and matures. How the disorders affect them does change, and so that's why we like it within 3 years. We really need a clear diagnosis. However, the school systems don't really give diagnoses, and that's fine. We understand that, and we accept that we're not going to get a diagnosis from a school. It needs to be done by a qualified evaluator. Each institution has probably posted these documentation guidelines. So again, it's important to go online, look up the disability office at the college that the student is interested in, and see what they say. And I know that there's a really teeny small link here under the BOR, the Board of Regents criteria. And what I can do is if you want me to send you this link, I can do it in an email where it's nice and big for you. But this is a link to the actual documentation criteria established by the University System of Georgia. And it's for all disabilities, not just LD and ADHD. There's disability documentation standards for all categories of disability. So it's important for parents and for transition counselors and teachers, and anybody who's working with a student as part of a transition plan, it's important to know what these standards are so that you can best direct the students. I would say to students, seek an evaluation during your senior year of high school from the school, and then consult with me at the RCLD on how, what needs to be in that documentation, what needs to be in that evaluation. And the reason I say this is because I love our evaluations. We do a comprehensive evaluation at the RCLD, and it's, a student will learn a lot about themselves, and it's fantastic. And it costs $500. And so a lot of people cannot afford $500. If they were to get this evaluation from a private psychologist, it'll cost you $3,000. No kidding, I'm not exaggerating. So while the student is still in the school system, I recommend that they get the school to do this evaluation. And that can be hard. A lot of schools don't feel like they need to do that. They're not required to do an evaluation for transition. But I would argue that if it's in their transition plan that the school is developing, that they're going to college, then the school system does bear some responsibility in helping that student with that transition. So I will say that an evaluation done by the school system does not generally meet the guidelines, the documentation guidelines for colleges. There are some areas that are not tested. And so that's why I say consult with the RCLD, print out, go to this link, go to the documentation standards and print out what the documentation guidelines are and give them to a parent or give them to the IEP team or the school psychologist so that they're aware of this is what we're looking at, this is what the student needs. Once the student has made some decisions about where they're going, it's real important to meet with that disability office even before they're admitted. And I would submit my documentation to them and let them review it. And they'll come back, and sometimes they'll send it to me for review if they're in my area. Other times they'll send it to another Regent Center, but you'll at least know whether or not your documentation meets the guidelines, and if it does, yay, wonderful. If it doesn't, then it'll tell you what's missing, and then you can work on getting those missing pieces. And so that's why it's very, very important to start early and to talk with the disability offices on college campuses. And that's the link, again, to the USG standards. It's a bigger link. I can also email you this presentation. I have no problems with that either, where it has the links and everything. So at the end, I'll give you my email address, and if you want, you can email me and ask for this additional information. I'll be happy to share it with you. So, accommodations. Accommodations are not the same as in high school, although some are. I don't want to give you the impression that there's no overlap, but there are. But there's some things that are done in high school that may not be done in college. So it's just really, again, important for the student to understand their disability, what they need, and to be able to talk to the disability provider on the college campus about that. And talk about these accommodations. They're not going to be able to retake a test ever in general. If they miss it and have discussed things with a professor, then they might be able to take the test. But if they take the test and do poorly, they're not going to be able to retake it to get a better grade. And that's just a small example of things. In general, you're not going to get open book tests or open note tests. So really, there are some common accommodations, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But it's it's very, very, very important, and I'm going to say this over and over again, because if you take nothing else from this presentation, you're going to leave here knowing that documentation is important and that all accommodations are tied back to that documentation. And if the documentation barely meets minimum standards, you're going to get barely minimum accommodations. If that documentation is comprehensive, you're going to get more comprehensive accommodations. And it's also important to note that accommodations are determined on an individual basis. So yes, we may say, hey, in general, all students with attention deficit should get note takers. And probably a lot of them do. But that doesn't mean that everybody does. And so everything is very individualized, and it's also, again, tied back to those deficits and those identified areas of need in the documentation. Okay. What happens in the college environment is that a disability provider will review the documentation. If it meets the eligibility guidelines, yay, it's wonderful. And then they're looking at, okay, well, how can we accommodate you? And they talk to the student, and they get some information from the student about what they've used in the past. They can look at high school records like IEP records and things to see what was used in the past. Then they look at the courses that they're taking in college to see, you know, does this accommodation make sense in this particular class? And then they try to match the accommodations to the areas of deficits and to the areas of strength for a student. They assign the accommodations, and they work closely with the student to do that. And then they monitor them and modify them. And the way that accommodations are monitored, the responsibility falls largely on the student. The student needs to tell the disability person if they're running out of time with their time and a half that they get for a test, if they're still not able to finish, or if they're in a room taking a test with other people and they're very, very distracted, that it's causing them to not be able to complete the test and not be able to focus on the test, that they might need a private room. So accommodations can be modified and adjusted, and they can be adjusted for just one class and left alone in other classes. So it's, again, goes back to the student being able to feel comfortable enough with their disability person to talk to them about their needs and about what's working and what's not. And remember, we are trying to ensure that students are given an opportunity to have equal access to information as well as equal access to demonstrate their knowledge of the subject area. We're not guaranteeing success in that. They have the right to fail, unfortunately. They have the right to fail a class or a test. Here are some examples of accommodations that are used, and these are very familiar, I'm sure, to all of you. Extended time on exams. Generally, it's time and a half or double time, but again, it's based on individual needs, so there could be other extended times given. It's not unlimited time. You don't get as much time as it takes you to finish. There is a time limit. Students can bring in a recorder into class, and oftentimes students in math classes sometimes ask for the math class to be videotaped. It's really hard to go back and listen to a math class and try to follow in your notes. It's much easier to watch a video where you can actually see the professor rework the problems on the whiteboard. So videotaping is used. Let's see. I have books on tape here, but it's really more alternative text, as we call it. In the olden days, we had people who read books onto cassette tapes, and now we have scanners, and we turn things into digital audio files, and students can put these on their iPods and listen to their textbooks on their iPod. They can have computer software that they open up the file in this software, and it not only reads the text, the student can see it and follow along with the reading. And so a lot of these accommodations for reading are pretty advanced with some of the changes in technology. And of course, other things like sign language interpreters. Some of our older campuses have classrooms in inaccessible buildings. We have on UGA's campus a historical building, and there's no elevator in it, and they put classes on the second floor. Well, if I have a student in a wheelchair, they cannot get to that classroom. So we have to work with the department, and we have that classroom moved to a location that is accessible. So there's a lot of accommodations that can go on in a college setting for students. Okay, things that you really need to think about in preparing for this transition. And if you're a senior, you need to work really, really hard now on these. If you're younger, you have some time, but it's real important to work on these things. First one being study skills. And I like to use the example of my son, who does not have a disability. He is, this super genius guy, and never had to crack a book. He could listen to the teacher and get it. If he did read a book, he understood it the first time, and so he didn't really develop any kind of study strategies. And then he went to college. And you can imagine what happened to him in college. Eventually, he hit a place where suddenly now he had to figure out, how do I take notes? How do I study? How does this work? And it was a rough couple of courses there for him until he figured it out. It would have been so much better if he could have figured it out before he got to college. So understand your learning style, understand your disability and how it affects you. If you know that you have difficulties with reading, then it's important to start now and figure out strategies that will help you read, because when you get to college, you have a ton of reading. So understand what your study strategies are going to be, and if you're still in high school, your teachers and your IEP team and your family can really help you kind of pull this together. I'd also get a copy of my evaluation. If the school did a psycho ed eval on you, I think you should read it. And you may or may not understand all that they say because they use a lot of psychological jargon, but it's important for you to read it and talk to people about what it means, because you need to know. You need to know about you, and you need to know that, yes, this is a test, and it was a test of you on one day. So it's just a snapshot of what you were like on one day of your life. It doesn't define you as a person, but it does help you understand some things about yourself. It doesn't mean that you can't grow and evolve, but it does help you understand that. So it's important for you to read your own psychological report and talk to people about it. Technology, huge, big. Colleges are using technology in the classroom. You may go to class, but then outside of class, you're asked to log in and do some things on some classroom management programs, and you're asked to turn in homework assignments via your
everybody. I guess we'll just give her another minute to see if she logs back on and we can continue.
So we had a really good question from Emily. Emily, can you hear me? Just type in your space bar if you can. Anyway, Emily said, well, how does a person know what they need? And we had a response from a mentor saying that, well, you know, you need to learn about the things you are good at, the things that kind of come easy, and the things that are kind of challenging. And Emily wrote that math was difficult. So Emily, tell us if you would just kind of type it in, other things that you know you're really good at. You're really good at art, I know that. Tell us other things that you're really good at.
I'm not sure if she, oh, there you go.
I'm back if you can hear me.
Great, we can hear you there.
It almost made it to the end. I think this is my last slide. Is
30 minutes is pretty good.
Emily was just, we were talking about how to identify your strengths and how to know what things you need support in. So Emily was just kind of typing in
let me tell you,
all the things she thought she was really good at.
Right. Let me share with you. In the I think it's the self-determination module on the BreakThru website, there are some worksheets that are part of that module. And if you haven't visited that module in a while, you may want to go back and do that, because those worksheets on there help you identify your strengths and your weaknesses. And they also help you learn how to, it kind of gives you guidance on how to communicate your needs. So I would like to redirect you back to that module and work with your mentor on it, because I think there you're going to find a lot of support for identifying your strengths and weaknesses. Am I still good? Y'all can still hear me?
Yep, still good.
Okay, okay. The other thing that you can do, Emily, is get a hold of your evaluation and sit down with, I would sit down with an adult and go through it. And it would have to be an adult or you know, just someone who can break it down for you. I don't mean adult in a bad way. I just mean someone who is qualified, I guess, to break it down for you. I had a student once when I worked at Auburn, and the person who did her evaluation just handed her the evaluation and didn't talk to her about it. And when she read it, she read terms like borderline mentally retarded and some things in her report that really scared her. It didn't mean that she was mentally retarded, but by just handing that to her, she had no idea what she was reading. And so I wound up sitting down with her and going through it. I think it's important for someone knowledgeable to sit down and go through those reports and really help a student understand. Assistive technology was the piece I think I kind of dropped off on. Assistive technology are those technologies that help you accommodate your disability, like the reading software that I shared earlier. There's also things, I think you've even seen it on TV, the speech-to-text software, where you speak into a microphone and the computer types in what you say. So it kind of works around some of the writing issues that someone might have. If you have some kind of writing disability or motor issue, coordination issue that would affect your writing. So working with your IEP team, you can identify these technologies that can help you and then start using them while you're in high school. Because to try to go to college, figure out the environment, where do you go, what room are you in, and then learn a technology all at the same time is really hard. So it's important to maybe try to start that now. We've already talked about being a self-advocate, and the self-determination module on our website also talks about self-advocacy, and you actually kind of have some outlines of how you talk to people about your disability there. So again, I would direct you back to that particular one. Also, I have a timeline handout that I can email you, and it really just says, you know, when I'm in the 9th grade, here's some things I can do, 10th grade, 11th, and 12th grade, and there's things and activities that you should be working on if you're preparing for this transition to college. And so I can get that to you. So those are the big things to work on in terms of transition, that and your documentation. I will also want to share with you, I don't have a slide on it, but not sure if many of you have heard about vocational rehabilitation services. I call them VR for short, but vocational rehab is a state agency that takes our tax money and uses it to help employ people with disabilities. They want to turn people with disabilities into employees who pay taxes, right? So it's kind of giving back. If you have a disability, you could qualify for assistance from VR. Again, they're going to ultimately want you to be employed, but part of being employed is getting trained for that job, and training can include going to college. So in the past, VR has helped fund students with disabilities to go to college. They've paid tuition and books. They've bought assistive technology and computers for students. And so they can be a huge resource for you as a family if you're looking for ways to help fund some of the services and to fund college. And they can also send you for an evaluation. So there's a lot of things that vocational rehab can do, and what you can do in order to locate the vocational rehab person, they divide it out by county that you live in. So just get online. All of you are great computer people. Get online and Google Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Services, and go to their website, and then just follow along, you know, to try to locate your county office, and then you can find their phone number and call them. Call them and say, hey, I'm a student with a disability, or if you're a parent, say, hey, I have a kid who has a disability, and you know, I need to know what kinds of services you can provide. We are looking toward potentially going to college or to be employed somehow. So, you know, we need to sit down and talk with someone, and they will take it from there. So they are a huge resource for people with disabilities. And that is true. I'm reading some of the comments. Your mentor can help you with this. And mentors that are here and logged in, you certainly can contact me, and you can contact Lisa and Summer, and we can we can help guide you through some of the specifics about your situation that you're working with your student on transition if you want. So don't feel like you have to remember everything from this presentation. Yeah, but you can certainly come to us with questions, and we can help get you to the right place. So I think that's my last page. Although I'm not a moderator, so I can't change the page anymore. So maybe Summer, if you could hit, there we go. Thank you. Here's some key issues. The IEP probably does not meet the documentation requirements for post-secondary institutions. So if you think, oh, I can just grab my IEP or my 504 plan and give it to the college, it's not going to work. You actually need bigger documentation than that. And it depends on your disability, but if there's a cognitive type of disability, the ones I mentioned earlier, you're going to need a psychoeducational. If they're more medical, then you're going to need statements from doctors, that kind of thing. Accommodations in high school are not guaranteed in college. We like adult documentation, and that's really kind of a misleading statement. Instead of saying adult documentation, let me say we want your documentation to be within 3 years of the time you apply for college services. So that's an important piece. Check with your DS, the Disability Services Office. Use the guidelines for the University System of Georgia. Seek an evaluation during your senior year from school so that you don't have to pay for a big evaluation. I will tell you that the Regents Center at UGA does serve high school students who are transitioning to college. So if you are a parent here and you feel like your child is in need of a reeval, you can come to our center and go through that reeval. It will cost you $500, but it is wonderful $500 spent. So if you can afford it, and do it. And we have a scholarship that can help offset the cost of that $500. So if you're interested in that, you can email me later. And I have handouts that I can email everybody after this. Well, actually, you need to email me. That'll cue me to email you back. So, are there any other questions about transitioning? Things that if you're here and you're a student, are there things that you're worried about in terms of transition to college? Concerns that you have that maybe we could try to help answer for you? And if you don't think of them now, you certainly can ask your mentor about them.
Yeah, this is Lisa talking. Alex, I wanted to know if you had any questions about, what you've heard. A lot of this stuff is kind of, it's kind of hard to understand. I just wanted to make sure that you understood. Do you know about what your documentation is, and also what your accommodations are? Just you can hit the talk button if you want to talk.
Emily, I'd like to respond to your question here. She wrote, if an IEP is not taken by colleges and other schools.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, who is it? Who's speaking? Okay. So, Emily.
I'm sorry, that was Yashi.
Oh, hi, Yashi. Let me answer Emily's question, and then please feel free to ask yours.
Okay.
So the IEP is a useful document within the school system. It is used as part of the process throughout your kindergarten through high school, through 12th grade, and the IEP is an important document for that, and it works well within that system. And but it doesn't transfer and transition well into the new college or work environment. That document doesn't work in those areas. So it is good. It's a good document for while you're in the K-12, but it's not going to work in college. Although they will review it to look at your history and to see what you've done. Okay, go ahead, Yashi. I'm sorry.
It's okay. So what you're saying is that students need to go to the disability office of the specific college that they want to go into and ask what their specific requirements are?
Yes, in general, they should have the Board of Regents documentation requirements, but each disability office has their own process for how you get accommodations. So there'll be other forms that a student will have to fill out, and so it's important to kind of start that early because it'll be a lot of paperwork for students to have to do.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's important to give them your documentation, even if you're not admitted. Say, hey, would you all please review this? I think I'm coming in the fall, but I'm not admitted yet. But could you review my documentation to make sure that I'm not missing anything? And most disability offices will not have a problem doing that. Emily, do you have your hand up?
Emily, you can talk. You can hit the talk button and ask a question.
I know her mic was having a hard time before.
Well, just type it in the chat box.
Let's see, is it Alex? Alex, you wrote some of the accommodations. You said you remembered that extended time on assignments is something that you receive now. That is something that can happen in college, although it is more difficult. And the reason why I say that is if you get extended time on one assignment, and you use up that extra time, it could overlap with the next assignment. And then suddenly you can find yourself so far behind in assignments that you're not even participating well in the class. And so disability offices work really closely with that particular accommodation. So if that's something that you feel like you need, I would talk when you get set up in your college. Go talk to them about that and see what can be done. They just don't want you to put yourself in a hole and get so far behind on assignments that you can never catch up to the current one, if that makes sense. So there is such a thing as extended time on assignments in college, but it's a rarer accommodation. It's not given as often, but it can be. So don't be discouraged about that. Okay, well I see that we're close to finishing. I know that once we leave, you guys are going to be thinking about this presentation because it was so compelling and so exciting that on your snow evening, you're going to think about it. But if you do think of questions this evening or in the next couple days, please feel free to email me. If you have something in fact, I'm going to type it into the chat. I'm going to type my email address into the chat box. It is, if you have something to write with, gwolfe@uga.edu. And so please feel free to email me at any time. You probably have emails from me more than you want, but please feel free to contact me or Lisa or Summer anytime. Final thoughts?
Can anyone hear me?
We can.
Yes, I got a question or concern.
Go ahead.
If they don't take IEPs for a college or a training school, then maybe a job site won't take it. So if a job site won't take your IEP or applications you have from college, are there any applications you can fill out for the government of Georgia or for the federal government that you need to fill out in order to either obtain a job or obtain the help needed to perform that job admirably? Or is it just a thing you have to tell your boss on site that, hey, I need this certain thing in order to do my job right?
Right. That's a very good question. The IEP, and I'm sure there's a lot of special ed teachers here still that could maybe answer this better, but the IEP is a form. It's a big form that encompasses a lot of information, including your evaluation. I'm sure, Emily, that you have had an evaluation from the school, and that evaluation document is what you need to give to the colleges. So although the IEP won't work, your evaluation, the actual psychoeducational evaluation, will be something that they will want. So that's, I guess, part of the answer to your question. In terms of working, you know, should you get a job and you find that you need accommodations at your work site, then you would go and talk with your employer in a private location, talk and explain that, you're having trouble fulfilling this because you have this disability and you would like an accommodation for that. And then the employer may want some information from you. They may want you to bring a letter from a doctor, or they may want your psycho ed eval, but you can go and ask the employer directly. Does that make sense? I think, Emily, you have an evaluation that will work. The IEP is just a big form that contains a lot of information, including your evaluation, but they don't always write in all the evaluation stuff into that IEP. So really you need to get your evaluation
document
from
an IEP if you can't use it outside of school. Like, shouldn't the IEP be for college or any other educational system that we have in the United States? And why isn't it like that?
No. Well, at the beginning, and I'm not sure if you were at the beginning of the presentation, I talked about the differences between high school and college and the laws.
I was trying to log in.
Say, here's what you have to do to be educated in K through 12. And that IEP document, that's okay. That IEP document is really, really good in your school system. Within the school, within your secondary education, the IEP is a really great document and it works well for that system. But when you go outside that system and you go into another system, they require something else. And that is true if you're in college and you leave college, then your employer may want something else. So it's because they're separate. They're not one big educational system. Going to K through 12, you have to. By law, you have to go to school. Going to college, it's a privilege. Not everybody goes to college. And so the whole college system is set up very, very differently from high school. So the IEP is a really great document. I don't want you to think it's not. It's really useful in your school system. It's just when you leave that school system and you go to college, they're going to want something.
They're going to want something more like actual psychological evaluations from either a licensed doctor or a psychotherapist of some sort, right?
Well, or your school psychologist. I'm sure that the school psychologist within your school did an evaluation on you, didn't they? I think. So you probably have that document
back in 2012, so I think it's up to date. I'll have to check with my mom about that. I could get back to you on that.
Yeah, just check on it. Yeah, check on that.
I have my medical papers nearby. There's also another concern I have. Will autism programs in the college community grow or shrink in the next few years? Because I've seen, from what I've read in studies and surveys online, and I'm not sure if this is true or not, so bear with me on this, that the autism community in Georgia is swelling, like growing slowly. So is there going to be like more participation in the autism program, more attention towards it in politics and budget discussions, or is it just going to stay in the shadows like it usually does? At least that's what I think.
Let's give Jerry a minute. She might have lost her connection. Really good question, though.
Emily?
Yeah?
Yes, I just have a quick question. I know that students have different mentees. You know, some can be in college, some can be, you know, teachers. Is your mentee a special education teacher?
No, my mentor is Magna from Georgia Tech, and I think she just graduated recently in a major in like biochemistry, I think it was.
Okay, because, I mean, those are a lot of valid special education questions. I'm a special ed teacher, and, you know, I know that, as Dr. Wolf is saying, that information is available, but if you would like, I will give you my email address, and, you know, you can reach out to me, and, you know, we can speak if you know, just to help out.
Yeah, I know a lot about it because I've been in the system for about, I think, going on to 14 years now. I was diagnosed at the age of 3, and I talked to a lot of specialists and education teachers. And, well, I'm more friends with the teachers than I am the students most of the time. So I learn a lot of things. I also look up a lot of surveys. My parents look up a lot of surveys, and we tend to look towards the actual facts rather than the emotions behind it sometimes. So, and that's just from the way I see it. I mean, some people might see it differently, like you might see light green, but I might see dark green or something like that. Different perceptions can often lead to different insights in the world, which is what makes autism so special, is they have the ability to look at things in a new way and that it may not have been thought of before. Like, say, what Steve Jobs, like Bill from Dell, or Steve Jobs invented the iPod. There are different innovations you can create from having different perspectives on a problem, and I think that the more point of views you have on a problem, the easier or the better way it is to solve them, to find a potential solution that might not have been thought of before. And I think of myself as a person who thinks up multiple solutions and tries to implement them all at once, and if one doesn't work, I switch to another and to another, like different tools you use. If you can't find the right tool, try a different one.
Okay. So I just sent you my email address. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and because I'd like to help. And I'm going to run. I have to go pick up my kids. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Yashi.
Okay. Have a great night, guys.
You too.
Thank you.
Really, really good questions, Emily, and we can help you with that. You know, your concerns are real, and you know, we want to help you with those. And I think your question about students with autism entering college, I think that is on the rise because kids know what their accommodations are and are getting better at telling people, you know, you're a really, really smart young lady and you will get into college, and you have to lean on people that, you know, have the information and want to help you.
It takes a lot to learn from this type of systems. When I came into Gwinnett County, I was hopping around from school to school, and it was very frustrating because I never had a set of teachers I could learn from long term. And I think that since my generation's finally passed, it's time for to so-called pass the torch on to new generations of autism students. So I try to reach out as best I can to the autism community and help spread the flame of knowledge to help ignite and illuminate new minds. And that's what BreakThru is about, isn't it? Illuminating minds and helping them reach out into the technical field that's rapidly growing in the United States. And hopefully we can get more people like Steve Jobs out in the world making good money, but at the same time also helping the world become a much faster, a much more complicated place, because the U.S. needs to catch up. The whole world is speeding up, and we need to start speeding up as well if we're going to catch up and become the superpower that we are meant to be, or in some cases actually help the world advance. But if we can't help the world advance, we might as well help the process along and speed it up with the other parts of the world, like, for instance, China and Japan and the UK and other nations are rapidly growing, and we're slowing down. We need to speed up fast.
You're absolutely right, sweetie, and that's what BreakThru is all about. We want to help kids graduate from high school and get into college and get great jobs. So I'm going to see if Jerry, Dr. Wolf, is back with us. Jerry, can you let us know?
I don't think I think she logged in for a while and logged back out, so I'm not sure what happened, but.
Okay. All right. Well, everyone, I'm going to close the session. Thank you so much for joining us. We are all available by email. Please let us know. We'll be sending out links, for more information if you're interested. And so have a great night and happy snow day tomorrow.
Thanks again, everyone, and like Lisa said, just feel free to email us if you have any questions, and if we don't know the answer, we'll be sure to, extend out and try to find the answer for you.
Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
I'll see y'all later.